think Mars is really like, but that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Carl. We now go from the scientist to the science fiction writer. On our far right, you know, one of the nice things about this job is I really don't have to introduce anybody here because you know them all so well. Not on the far right, excuse me. I'm going to introduce Ray Bradbury, whom, of course, you all know is one of the two foremost science fiction writers. He's particularly an appropriate occupant of this seat on the platform because of the book that he wrote, which many of us know well, The Martian Chronicles. Ray Bradbury.
Thank you. I don't know what in hell I'm doing here. I'm the least scientific of all the people up on the platform here today. 9-year-old boys are always finding me out. A 10-year-old boy a few years ago ran up to me and said, "Is that Mr. Bradbury?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That book of yours, The Martian Chronicles?" I said, "Yes." He says, "On page 92? I said, "Well," he says, "where you have the moons of Mars rising in the east?" I say, "Yes." He says, "No." So I hit him. Good for you. I'll be damned if I'll be bullied by boys. So I admit my sins and my crimes, and I admit that my father, in many ways, is Edgar Rice Burroughs. I think we've all had this wonderful experience of falling in love with Mars through Edgar Rice Burroughs. I think he did more to change our lives than a lot of the other much more famous writers. I mean, we like to talk about Jules Verne, and we love him. I know I love Jules Verne very much. It's interesting that Burroughs is a romantic, and Jules Verne is a romantic and also a moralist. Well, that extra moral thing sort of takes some of the fun out here and there. But Burroughs was not a moralist. He was always cutting people's heads off and leaving the bodies there, which was all right, and then on to the next. But years later, people have said, "How could you have been influenced by this man? His style is so awful." But that isn't the point. I don't go back to reread these things for the style. I go back occasionally to remember the boy that I was when I was 9, 10, and 11, and fell so completely in love that it changed my life forever. My books couldn't exist without Edgar Rice Burroughs. So that when I grew up, and it moved me into the field of writing along with H.G. Wells and finally Huxley and other people like that. But I have to give credit to Mr. Burroughs for the initial explosion which changed my life. And so when I wrote The Martian Chronicles, if you take a long look at it, there are echoes of Burroughs all through the book. Except again, I'm borrowing the influence of the moralist Jules Verne. I'm a bit of a moralist myself. I hope not too pontifical, because I like to have a lot of fun with my writing. I like to get my ideas down at the top of my enthusiasm. But I was hoping that during the last few days, as we got closer to Mars and the dust cleared, that we see a lot of Martians standing there with huge signs saying Bradbury was right. Or even Clarke. But it looks like now you are present at a moment in history when, with the Greeks and the Romans, we must retire to the wings and become part of mythology. So you have a real live author up here on the stage today who from this weekend on will become mythological. And in fact, I was rather pleasantly surprised to discover 2 weeks ago at a school I was visiting that I was being taught as mythology, even before I was dead. And I liked that. I was worried a few years ago that I was going to go out of existence completely, once we hit Mars. But now I realized that what I was doing was writing fairy stories, writing a mythology, doing the Bible over, really. The Martian Chronicles is very much akin to the influences also of the Old and the New Testament on me as a child. And in fact, one of my latest stories tells of the second coming of Christ on Mars. And you'll have a chance to see that sometime during the next year, in spite of what happens this weekend. And I have brought along today, I'm going to keep this short because I'd much rather listen to our scientific friends here today tell us about what's coming up this week. But every time I get a group of people together and have them trapped in a hall like this, I bring a poem, see? And you can't escape me. But luckily it's a short poem, but it sums up some of my feelings on why I love space travel, why I write science fiction, why I'm intrigued with what's going on this weekend on Mars. And part of this has my philosophy about space travel in it, and if you'll permit, I'll read it to you. It's very, very short. The fence we walked between the years did balance us serene. It was a place half in the sky where in the green of leaf and promising of peach, we'd reach our hand to touch and almost touch the sky. If we could reach and touch, we said, 'twould teach us not to, never to, be dead. We ached and almost touched that stuff. Our reach was never quite enough. So, Thomas, we are doomed to die. Oh, Tom, as I've often said, how sad we're both so short in bed. If only we had taller been and touched God's cuff, his hem, we would not have to go with them who've gone before, 1 billion, give or take, 1 million boys or more, who, short as us, stood tall as they could stand and hoped by stretching tall that they might keep their land, their home, their hearth, their flesh and soul. But they, like us, were standing in a hole. Oh, Thomas, will a race one day stand really tall across the void, across the universe and all, and measured out with rocket fire, at last put Adam's finger forth, as on the Sistine ceiling, and God's hand come down the other way to measure man and find him good and gift him with forever's day? I work for that. Short man, large dream. I send my rockets forth between my ears, hoping an inch of good is worth a pound of years. Aching to hear a voice cry back along the universal mall, we've reached Alpha Centauri. We're tall. Oh, God, we're tall.
Thank you, Ray. I hate to bring us back to Earth after that. In fact, down to Earth, down to geology, in fact, in a sense.